Good morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Pointe Blank 1 minute at a time. I'm Dev.
And I'm Hugh, and on today's show, we are looking at minute 103. It's time. In all rom-coms, there comes a moment where somebody must propose to somebody else. Here we are.
And back with us again today on today's show, we have Catch You Later, GBP fan extraordinaire. Pretty sure I'm saying GBP instead of GPB.
Probably.
Welcome back.
Thank you. This is great.
So, yes, Martin has just gotten to the door and opens the door to be shot at by Debi, who's not actually looking, which is a very smart move, I feel. Like, just like lifting your hand out and just taking a couple shots is probably not a bad way to go. Except when you're potentially hitting your boyfriend. But that aside, and then we have Martin's proposal to Debi and father-in-law's approval, and then it cuts to the radio station again.
And it's kind of interesting because the radio station shows very clearly reel-to-reel tapes for those of almost every age who are possibly listening to this who don't know what these things are. Oh, in the days before cassette and before 8-track and before a whole bunch of formats you probably don't remember, audio was recorded on very, very large amounts of magnetic tape. Yeah,
which is actually kind of coming back into fashion to use again.
Well, the thing is the digital quality of it. The quality of what it records is astonishing because the amount of data you can fit on it. I mean, we were still using like in video, home video, when Devlin was working with me, we were still using 1-inch digibeta as the main master across the world for everything. And it wasn't until I can't even remember which natural disaster in Japan destroyed Sony's not just production house, but it destroyed its warehouse with all the stock for the entire world of digibeta that everyone en masse around the world. So this is in the 2000s. Like news reporters, everybody started switching wholesale over to digital because digibeta was just like a tape, but you could record across it again and again and again with no loss of quality, and you could dub down from it with no loss of quality. So so no, it's anyway. What you see is two reel-to-reel tapes going, which have Debi's audio from it, because actually this is, she's done now. I mean, will she ever come back? Who knows? But for now, her job is actually all recorded, and she's left it running, and she's off.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like that idea. Yeah. But I also find it interesting that they're off driving. I just suddenly realized how many American films. This is obviously a very culturally specific notion, but how many American films, the happy ending is a girl and a guy in a car on a road in the sun?
Yeah, driving off into the sunset. Literally, right? Driving off into the sunset. It is actually a sunset as they're filming this. You can kind of see it reflected in the hood and in the lighting on the buildings. I do love the chauvinism of Martin being the one driving Debi's car.
Yes,
it's clearly Debi's Saab, but Martin's the one driving.
And it's a convertible.
Which
for a hitman seems very...
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not the nice, safe Lincoln town car that was being used up to this point. Also, Debi with a cigarette. I mean, this is not something that you see in films these days.
No.
And it doesn't really get called out in the way of impromptu Marlboro ads that we got in the 60s and 70s, but it's definitely there, and I think probably enough to bump it a rating these days.
Probably, yeah. I mean, it's definitely at this point in time, it's definitely past its sell by date. I think you and I mentioned, and I think we did this off podcast in the previous podcast, about the fact that by this point Bond has already moved on from smoking.
Yeah,
thingamajig, Pierce Brosnan's Bond very deliberately, very clearly does not smoke and makes a point of it. So this is the new era, the new heroes, and I don't think we ever see Martin smoke, do we?
No.
I don't think so.
I don't think we see anybody smoke actually until that point.
I feel like we see somebody with a cigar. Yeah.
Marcella's got a cigarette. I don't think. Do we see anyone with a cigar?
I'm sure
Your
we
dog
see
just
somebody.
said
I don't.
no.
Yeah, Chili says there's nobody there. I'm wrong on that. So I do, but yeah, I do. As you say, this is a good example of moving on from that. I imagine that didn't stop everybody smoking off camera, and I imagine that being someone who's partly Brit, I imagine the Brits in particular are notorious in Hollywood for carrying on smoking even while everyone else says you can't smoke.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, so that wouldn't surprise me if she does actually smoke. Or did.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I think in Mini Driver's podcast, Mini Questions,
Mm,
there is actually, like, I think that she actually talks about that with one of the people she interviews about, like, the kind of culture shock of smoking in California and versus the UK, and how things have changed. Because it is an interesting change that's happened over the last 20, 25 years, especially with, then after that, the advent of vaping being such a rampant thing in the UK compared to what you see in California.
yeah.
They're also
Yeah.
using a digital camera, which I didn't think of much of it before, but they're using a digital camera, which seems advanced. I mean, I guess I could have film in it, huh?
Is it? I mean,
I mean, the small one he used earlier was
This-
definitely film, even though it was a small spy film.
That's probably what it is. I think the other thing about that is what they're taking pictures of each other, and I have a sense that Martin before this probably wasn't in a lot of pictures because that would be documenting
Absolutely.
where you are and showing your life, and
Yeah.
that's not what he was about.
There's actually a line in the not sequel War Inc. where he actually says to someone who wants to take a photo of them, "No photos." And I remember
Yeah.
thinking, that's the sort of thing I'm amazed we didn't actually find in this film. It's exactly the sort of thing Martin would say.
Yeah.
I mean, he said he tries not to even to go on the mic when he's in the radio as well. That's really funny when he tries not to go on air, and she's like, I love how she's just like physically gesturing, like forcing him to do something he doesn't want to do.
I think it is a film camera. I feel like digital cameras.
97, it must have been.
Yeah, that's what
When
I
did
was
you get
feeling
your
like.
first digital cameras?
I mean, so technically the first ones were in like 1988, but they were pretty big clunky things. I don't think like consumer grade digital cameras really kicked off until the early 2000s.
I didn't start using one until 2001, I think.
Yeah.
I remember being in Australia in 2001 and taking some shots at Fox Studios Sydney.
I mean, ultimately, what it came down to is it was a long time before digital cameras were actually of a quality that compared with.
Oh God, yeah,
film.
the photos were awful.
Yeah.
Now we have these technical marvels.
Pretty amazing things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still prefer film. I still do. I like the there's something about it. I like the uncertainty of what's going to happen. I take a bunch of pictures of the same,
Mm-hmm.
the moment, how like a kid blowing out candles, maybe as an example.
Right.
But I like the film. I like the kind of not knowing if you got that magic moment. And then I like going through them all when you get them back from the developer.
You know what that experience is?
It's so I do. I like all that, but it's probably because I'm
tactile.
Thank you. That's a word. Yeah, because I'm tactile. Yeah, I like to do all of this stuff. But the phones make everything easier. But as far as taking pictures of a moment, I'd much prefer film.
There's a quality to film as well. It's that kind of gramophone record kind of aspect to it, that warmth.
You just called me old. That was adorable.
I mean, I thought all the cool hipsters were doing gramophone records these days.
I'm also not a cool hipster, so you definitely just called me old. Okay. Just point, called me old.
So, speaking as old person here, or middle-aged, I like to say, but obviously that means old these days. I think there's something else going on as well with this, because one of the schools I taught in quite recently, pre-COVID, they had an increasingly thriving GCSE GCSE A-level photography department, and the biggest growth was in kids coming in wanting to use physical over digital, and like this was happening all over the country as well. We were just reflective of a trend, and I'm fascinated. I was fascinated by that then. I remain fascinated by it now because I think it has continued to surge. And even kids who I know kids who don't have physical cameras who love looking at the settings on digital to make it look like physical. They love making it look like Polaroids. They love making it look aged, especially if they have grandparents or parents who have older physical film and can show them photographs. They're fascinated, as you say, by the tactile nature of it. And I think that's cool. I really love that. I miss. I kind of miss using it. I kind of miss, as you say, waiting to see if it develops. I love the fact that you can check and see on lighting immediately now. I love all of that. That's cool.
Yeah.
I love where we're at with the ability, if you are a photographer for whom time is money, to make it work. But for the casual, personal nature of it, there was something really exciting about waiting to see what it would have when it come back. And momentary regret that this didn't work, but then, oh, look, that one worked better than I thought. And that was always fun.
Yeah. I mean, it's the transition has also kind of happened with cinematography as well, right? I think there are filmmaking did go digital. It may not have gone digital quite as hard or as fast as photographers went digital, but I think there's also a growing group of cinematographers that are kind of returning back to 8mm or whatever, actual film and redeveloping those kind of classic elements and trying to recreate and capture that tone that you get from those.
Just called me old again. Recapture.
So I know he's the ref, but does that mean you can still accidentally smack him in the face as you go past?
Probably not on the track, but hey, practices are free. Free hits at practice.
I mean, he needs to get used to it, right?
It's going to be a long evening.
Oh yeah.
Oh dear, but yeah, it's there are some interestingly retro things about this. The sight holder on the gun that he's given Debbie and is interestingly retro in and of itself. These days everything's much sleeker. Everything's matte black plastic rather than stainless steel. She's still wearing a wristwatch. A lot of people, people still wear wristwatches, but not nearly as much when given the phones have clocks on them. There's all the little things that mark it out of its time, and yet things are back. I see people, more and more. I see younger people with watches, because if the battery dies on their phone, they still can tell the time and know when they have to get picked up and stuff. You got the phone, you got the cameras as well. You got all kinds of little things that's coming back bit by bit. I think the other thing I always kind of enjoy seeing around me, and I think this goes to the kind of the musical era that the film has very much been celebrating. And of course, as we pull back, we get, just as we hit the minute, we're about to get more great music. I feel like seeing everyone. This started several years ago, but watching everyone start to wear over the ear earphones again was such a brilliant thing. I know some people prefer in-ears, but there's something really nice about someone blatantly saying, "Yeah, I am listening to music. Sorry, you want to talk to me? Wave at me or something," rather than all these people who are busy like talking away, and you don't know if they're talking to you, someone else, if they're lunatics. You don't know.
Yeah, I've had this conversation before about the messaging of over-the-ear headphones, because these days, the noise cancellation on earbuds is phenomenal. So oftentimes you're wearing earbuds and you legitimately can't hear what a person is saying, but that person doesn't realize that you can't hear. They assume that you're just ignoring them or something like that. Like I have it when I'm out and about as well, because I'll often be wearing something that covers my ears and I've got earbuds in, which are noise cancelling to the point that I can't make out anything else going on in the world. And so I'm like, carrying on my merry way. But, people are trying to talk to me and have no comprehension that I'm, not on this planet at this point.
Yeah.
Have you embarrassed yourself where your like grocery store setting is the setting and you think somebody's talking to you and you're like, I'm going to have this quick interaction, about ice cream. no, they're on their phone selling real estate. And I'm like, I love pistachio, you know.
Yeah.
I like the obvious, well, you know, I wear actual headphones.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't do it another way. I like that it sends the message of I'm doing something. What I'm doing may not be important, but I am otherwise engaged, and I don't know.
Definitely when I'm at my desk and stuff, I prefer it. I mean, I've got like big ass ones here, but what I found is like traveling and stuff. I need something smaller. It's just so much easier to have something small and portable and tidy.
Yeah, I've gone the other way. I'm just making sure that anything I buy with a hood fits over the damn things.
I have 2 hoods.
I just like big hood. That's it. Because the thing is, I kickstarted a pair of cans that are beautiful and wonderful and technically ahead of their time, but they are freaking massive. So yeah. Anyway, not like
something
these.
I wanted to point out about this scene that because I also like to talk about.
No, please.
But I like that Debbie doesn't answer him. And I like the pause of just, I'm not quite ready for this yet.
Yeah.
It's
physical acting.
Yeah. Not
like the way the dad pats her is so cool.
Yeah.
And especially if so much of like the last few minutes, well, not even that, like the last 20 minutes of interactions between the two of them have basically just been Martin dumping on Debbie, right?
Yes.
Like all of his thoughts, all of his emotions, all of his justifications. And she's, we see her overloaded with that in the hotel room. And then we've kind of got this where it's even more so because, you got adrenaline, you got your fear of your life and all of this. Like, it is nice that it's not just like, and they live happily ever after right away. And there's clearly that jump cut of a little bit of time. She's had time to go into the station and record that message, and plan things out. And,
Yeah, no, agreed. I think that's a big part of it. I think there's something... we've talked before about my own personal sort of sense of how this film is positioned when it was made in gender terms. And I do like the fact that they allow her to shoot and they give her the agency, and she's taken ownership literally of the thing he taught her a short while ago. Yeah, I mean, that's a good that's a pretty decent shot she gets off there, right? If he hadn't pulled back as quickly as he had, he'd be in pain. But I also think that more, if you made this kind of film made now, would definitely need to see her do a bit more action, right?
Mm-hmm.
But just because that's the nature of how it is now. Like, again, the not sequel does something like that in that it insists on making sure that both Marisa Tomei and Hilary Duff get to do a little bit of stuff, even if it's just smacking someone or shooting a gun once. But the point is, they get that moment, and they are not seen as like weak.
Yeah. So for listeners, Hugh has finally watched War Inc.
Which we may or may not do an episode on in the year. And again, I can see now exactly why you wouldn't want to, but I would love to do it because they've just got so much to talk about.
All right. Well, I mean, if you're editing, I'm up for it.
Give me a year to learn the software because clearly I got no time to do it in the next 3 months. But yes, I would happily.
But yeah, so, and in that, it's interesting because almost there the action starts. I think there's one big scene where John Cusack really lets loose in that film. And then actually, like, there's a huge chunk of the film where he's kind of cowering and running from cover to cover to cover as stuff is going on around him. And even in the big end showdown, he's not really the key instigator of things.
No,
he's kind of playing second fiddle. And it is a very, very different tone in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is one of those things as well where even rom-coms, who proposes, who says what, who has the issues to work out, right? That's also shifted as well. It isn't just all on. I mean, not that it ever was all on the guy. Let's be honest. It's especially Nora Ephron films. The women have their stuff to get off their chest and they have their issues to work out. But once the films are made, there's still always a little bit of a sense that the guys are doing a lot more of the not therapy, but well, maybe that's Ephron's point. Men need to go to therapy more often. what's that meme? Men will do X, Y, Z instead of go to therapy, like, buy Twitter or build a tunnel. Something to be said for that.
Yeah.
Do a heist.
So yeah, Martin needs this. Yeah. This was minute 103 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio, 79.5 FM. This featured your co-hosts, co-writers, co-producers, Dev Soligar, and myself, Hugh David.
Today's guest has been Catch You Later, GPB fan extraordinaire.
Nice.
Catch, where can we find you and the things you do?
North Bay Derby is one of the things I do, and Catchatory Reviews. I like to talk on there a lot. I like to argue a little bit.
Nice.
Yeah, it's good for discussing movies, whether I agree with the review or not. It's just fun. It's fun to interact like that, as you do on your show. It's fun.
Yeah. You can find us at all good podcast players, YouTube, X, and Spotify at Debi Radio, and on our website debiradio.com. And for all of those, it is DEBI Radio.
And if you want to come and talk with us, find us at Facebook on the Facebook listeners group, which is Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club. That is, one last time, DEBI Radio.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time.